A very good morning to all. Thank you, Fukan sir. Thank you, Mukherjee sir, and thank you, Partho sir, for joining us today. I will quickly walk you through the radiology part. We all know that radiological evaluation is very important for the candidacy criteria as well as for the surgical feasibility. Let me just bring the DICOM software into the screen view. Yeah, it's coming. I hope it's visible, the DICOM view. Let me first go through the CT scan. This is the axial view of the CT scan, and I would like to go from above downwards. I will go from superiorly to inferiorly. So as I scroll down, the first thing which I have to look for is the parietal bone thickness on both the sides. So I have to first look for the asterion. I think the asterion is coming into view. That is the suture line between the squamous part of the temporal bone and the parietal bone. So just as the auricle is coming into view, as I was saying, the asterion is just visible here. And we have to look for the parietal bone thickness here. So I'm focusing first more on the right side. If we can also measure this thickness. So it's quite an adequate thickness of parietal bone on the right side. It's 3.92 millimeter. And on the left side, it is almost, yeah, it's 3.89. So it's a good parietal bone thickness. From that point of view, we are quite safe. That is for the implant bed. Second thing which we have to look for is the emissary vein. Sometimes it's quite prominent and it might pose some difficulty during the posterior superior flap elevation. So from that point of view also, I think we are safe on both the sides. Then we can see the cellularity of the mastoid coming into view. First, I'm focusing on the right side. So let me just magnify the right side. Okay. So we can see that it's a good cellular mastoid on the right side. And we can just view the superior semicircular canal. Tracing down, the posterior semicircular canal is coming into view, and we can see the whole cellularity of the mastoid bone here. Sometimes even the cornus septum is visible. Tracing down, we can see the internal auditory canal coming into view. And a point to note is that anything which is anterior to the internal auditory canal is the cochlea, and the vestibule and the semicircular canal is lying just posterior to the internal auditory meatus. We can see the posterior semicircular canal coming into view. And now the typical signet ring appearance of the lateral semicircular canal. Now here there are certain things to note. One is the diameter of the internal auditory canal. We can measure this. We're supposed to measure it at the midpoint. It is almost 3.83. That's a good diameter. Then the next thing which we have to note is the cochlear aperture. So let me just magnify it a little bit more. So the cochlear aperture here, the diameter is almost 1.67. So that's a good diameter again. Also, we can see the three turns of the cochlea coming into view, the interscalar septum. And as we just, the next important thing to note is the track of the facial nerve. So we can see that the facial nerve is coming into view, the labyrinthine portion. The typical bird beak sign is appearing here. This is the GSPN, greater superficial petrosal nerve. And this is the tympanic portion of the facial nerve coming into view. Also, we can see the two ossicles in the epitympanum, the malleus and the incus. Now we have to trace this horizontal portion of the facial nerve. If we trace it further, this is the facial nerve, this is the facial nerve. Here, one thing to note is the ice cream cone appearance. So this, we see that it's a good middle ear cavity with good aeration, and we see the incus at the malleus assembly intact. This is the facial nerve again on the right side. Tracing it further down, 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 down. And here we can see the oval window. This is the stapes. So this is the oval window. Going a bit down again, we can see the round window niche appearing. So this is the point where we have to measure the distance of the facial recess, and also the distance of the facial recess or the facial nerve, the vertical portion, up to the round window niche. This will give us an idea about the surgical feasibility during round window insertion through the facial recess approach. So we can measure this point. We see that the distance of the facial nerve, the vertical portion, up to the annulus is 5.56 millimeter, which is quite good. 3 millimeter is considered to be a good facial recess. And the distance of the facial nerve again up to the round window niche here is 4.24 again. So if it is more than 3 millimeter, it's considered to be a good distance. Now, as the round window started appearing here, we can also note another thing which is of importance, that is the internal carotid artery. So we have to note that there is an adequate thickness of bone between the basal turn of the cochlea and the internal carotid artery. So we can see that there is an adequate thickness of bone here. So we see that the right side is quite favorable from all these, as we have mentioned, all these points. It seems to be a favorable mastoid, favorable middle ear, favorable cochlea, and also favorable in terms of the internal auditory meatus. Also, the jugular bulb, we can note here, it's not high. It's not a high riding jugular bulb. There's no dehiscence noted here. So the right side seems feasible. There are two other things which we need to note. One is the vestibular aqueduct, which is just shown as a dimpling here. It is not enlarged. Also, the cochlear aqueduct, which is just noted here, seen as a hairline here. So it is not enlarged again. So the right side is quite feasible again. Let me go to the left side now. Again, coming from superior to inferior. Let me just magnify the left side. Okay, so already I've noted the parietal bone thickness. There is no prominent mastoid emissary vein there, so no trouble with that. Going down, we can see the superior semicircular canal coming into view, good cellularity of the mastoid. Then coming down and down, the posterior semicircular canal coming into view, the internal auditory meatus again. The facial nerve is just started appearing here, the bird beak appearance, GSPN here, the labyrinthine portion, the first genu, the horizontal portion of the facial nerve, then the ossicles coming into view, the typical ice cream cone appearance, the lateral semicircular canal, the typical signet ring appearance again. We see the three basal turns of the cochlea coming into view, then the cochlear aperture again, measuring it here, let's see. So it's 1.85 millimeter, which is favorable. Then the internal auditory meatus diameter, that's also 4.52, which is not bad. Then let's trace the facial nerve down, down, down. Here the oval window has started appearing. Again, going down. We can note the round window niche here. So we need to measure the distance here again. Distance from the facial nerve up to the round window niche, which is almost 5.12, which is good. And from the facial nerve up to the annulus, this is the area of the facial recess, which is 4.17, which is again favorable. Now, there are two other things which we can note in relation to the surgical feasibility. So when we see the round window appearing, let us take one side, let us the right side again. So if we see the round window appearing here, we can draw two lines, one tangential to the posterior bony canal and one tangential to the sigmoid sinus. So if we find the basal turn of the cochlea between these two lines, then this is considered to be a good indicator as regards to the surgical feasibility to the round window. Second important thing is one line drawn through the posterior bony canal again, another line drawn through the basal turn of the cochlea. So if we see that these two lines are not intersecting up to the mid-sagittal plane, then this is considered to be a good feasibility. Again, if we see on the left side, the jugular bulb is not high riding, there is no dehiscence noted. And let's check the round window area again. Yeah, this is the round window and this is the facial nerve. So if we draw a line through the posterior bony canal, another line through the sigmoid sinus area, we see that the round window is between the two lines. Let me just speed up because Biswa sir is going too fast. Okay, let me go back. Okay, so regarding the surgical feasibility, as in relation to this CT scan, it is considered quite, both the sides are quite compatible. We can go for any side actually. So let me quickly go through to the MRI part now. The most important MRI is the T2 sequence. Why? Because we need to find a good fluid-filled labyrinth, and second, we need to have a good cochlear nerve. So let me just magnify, again going from upward to downwards. Let's check both the sides. So we see a good fluid-filled cochlea here and the labyrinth, the semicircular canal and the vestibule. Secondly, if we magnify even more, we can also trace the nerve here. On the left side again, a good fluid-filled cochlea. We can note the three turns of the cochlea and the semicircular canal and vestibule. Also, the nerves are quite evident here. Another important sequence in MRI is the CIS or Fiesta sequence, which is a heavily T2 weighted sequence. Here, if we magnify, the nerves are even more prominent. Let me quickly go to that portion where the nerves are quite prominent. Focusing on the right side, we can very well note the cochlear nerve here. And this is the vestibular portion. So the cochlear vestibular nerve is here and dividing into the cochlear and the vestibular part. On the left side, also there's a good cochlear nerve and the vestibular portion is just dividing here. Next important thing to note is the coronal cut, where we can see the typical snail appearance of the cochlea. You can see all the turns of the cochlea and the labyrinth too. Now the last sequence which is important is the sagittal. The sagittal cut T2 weighted MRI, where we need to note the 4 dot sign. So we can see the 4 dot sign here. One side, this is the right side, and the left side is this one. So we can see 4 dot sign here. So we see that all the 4 nerves are intact. And also we see the 3D imaging here. You can see all the 3 turns of the cochlea and the labyrinth, right side and the left side. Okay, so I will quickly hand over to Biswa sir because he's through his surgery part, and we can take the questions in the midst. Thank you.